Yes, me hardly being able to walk, being over 75 years old and all that sort of stuff, it's time to stop hogging the show and pass the torch on to the younger generation. And hopefully here in the type of courses we teach at Caramat, you sign up and you're not sorry after that you did, because you maybe came away overwhelmed and said, I could have probably gotten more rest and didn't have so much thrown at me in this week that we do. We do have the odd individual that aspires to want to step into the instructional field, so we would like to participate in the process where we can produce people that can carry on this sort of knowledge in a coherent and educated way. So Brian is going to talk about bush tea. When you study the whole issue of what nature provides, and what you will find from my observation is that we have huge amounts of medicines, very little to eat. Keep that in mind. The type of food we're accustomed to from our garden in the form of potatoes and carrots and all that, you know, sweet, concentrated, juicy, tasty, very rare. But the medicines that you may even say are astounding herbal medicines, they're free for the taking. You know, the normal person who perhaps is studying to deal with the apocalypse, who wants to realize that your focus has to be on the medicinal aspect of the plants until you really work it out, and every once in a while you run across an edible. And here we have probably close to what you got 2 or 3 very, very prevalent and very useful, not just in survival but in our everyday living, because part of survival is to go back to the forest and harvest the medicines you have greater confidence in, where you don't have to pay the prescription fees and the astounding cost of the type of medicine provided to us by the medical fraternity, who all want to own snowmobiles and cottages at the lake and travel all over the world because they charge such a huge amount for the sort of stuff that they produce. But at any rate, we have what do we have there? Itchy ass berry for one, and Labrador tea,
and some pineapple weed and a bit of mint.
Yeah, well, there we go. Take it over there, Brian.
Thank you, Morris. All right, so you guys have been here for a while, and you guys have been such a trusting group because all of you have been drinking my tea, and not any of you know what is in the tea. And so now we're going to let you in on the gig and what you got in front of you. So what we have in front of us is 4 plants, pretty common to this area of the boreal forest. And I guess I'll just start off on the one that's right here in front. So we have our rose hips. Okay, so wild rose being the flower of Alberta, but the beauty of these rose hips is the amount of vitamin C that we get from these. And as Moore's affectionately called them, the itchy ass berries. If you eat and ingest these in great quantities, there is a good chance that you'll have a irritated ass. So there's little hairs inside these around the berries, and those hairs are what irritate your throat and on the way out as well. So, but to get around that, they make really good vitamin C in tea. So we'll just throw some of that in our teapot just to freshen it up. So we'll put those in there.
Yeah, those hairs are made of the purest silica, which is not really, you know, hydrochloric acid doesn't do very much to pure glass and stuff like that. There's little tubes, they fracture, and as a result they have a very serious potential for causing irritation, and I think it's there's a term for it, that you really become incapacitated if you're, because you can hardly walk. Every step is so painful. It's like someone has taken you know, this much barbed wire and coiled it up into a tight coil, and then you try to carry it without dropping it by using your sphincter.
Not recommended.
Very easy to cause barbed wire of the bum if you don't not careful about this cure.
So it is said that there's as much vitamin C in these 3 rose hips as it is in a full-size orange. So it should give you some kind of idea of how much vitamin C is in these. These actually, rose hips actually helped the war effort in England when they were socked in by the Germans. They needed to go out and harvest vitamin C, and so they literally sent everyone out to go get rose hips so that they could have a good supply of vitamin C. Next, we'll go over the Labrador tea. So as we've been out collecting materials today, or in the last few days, we've, you know, as you guys are collecting twig bundles, I'm in the bush collecting Labrador tea. So this is one, this is my base for almost every tea I start with because I love the flavor of it so much. It's got a bit of a jasmine-y flavor. Recognizable features are, so we have this nice diamond-shaped leaf, and then we have this nice orange underbelly. The flower, when it's flowering, is a white little flower, so that helps us because we don't want to confuse it with another plant that looks very similar to this, but has white hairs on the bottom and has pinky red flowers, and that's the bog laurel. Okay, the bog laurel is poisonous, and the Labrador tea is good for us. Okay, so when we talk about how much Labrador tea we should have, roughly we kind of take a handful or a palmful for each person, right? And we can throw that in there. So we'll throw that in there as well. Oh.
Or you can grab as much as you can with one hand, and that's good for a gallon of tea.
Some have said, especially I have a lot of East Coast friends from Newfoundland, Labrador, and they've said that never boil it because it'll give you the trots. I've never had that issue. For me, like I said, I drink it all the time, and my main way is to boil it, so I don't have any issue with it there. The next thing we have here is mint, or wild mint. So, you know, obviously it gives it a little bit of that flavor. One of the distinguishing features of mint is that it's got a nice square stalk on it. It's kind of a rare feature to find on plants, is to see a plant that's got a nice perfect square for a stalk. So we'll throw a bit of that in there as well.
Yeah, your Labrador tea sometimes is part of tobacco mixtures, and there'll be certain times in the spring when it's in blossom, and you can smell this very strong Labrador tea smell. If you sleep in that Labrador tea patch, by morning you'll be under some form of narcotic effect just from breathing the strong smell that's put out by the plant when the blossoms are out. What that narcotic is, I haven't subjected myself, but I've had students that have drunk enough tea that they turn green. There's probably, Labrador tea comes very close to being second after one of the most astounding plants called ratleaf. It's got so many, it's both a cure for constipation and diarrhea. So if you have one or the other, the same plant is used to cure both conditions, because both conditions are the flaccidity of the large intestine, and you need that large intestine to lose its looseness and to contract. So the same thing happens for both constipation and diarrhea, so the same cure for both conditions is Labrador tea.
And the last plant is pineapple weed, and if you're like me and you live in the city now, if you look at your walkways and that pretty little white and yellow flower that grows up between the cracks of the walkway, a lot of times, if you're as lucky as I was this summer, it'll be popping out of there in vast quantities. So I was able to harvest a whole lot of it this year. Pineapple weed has a really strong smell, and has a chamomile, a type of, but not quite. It can help calm and soothe you, so good nighttime tea, but you know what, I'll subject you guys to that too. I'm sure none of us will sleep anymore with the programming we have. So that's been the tea that we've been drinking here on the course so far. Like I said, for me, my base is always a Labrador tea. For me, this is if you come over to my house and you want to have tea, there's no gray, Earl Grey or Orange Pico or any of those things that come in bags. This is my tea here. It can be harvested, as you can see, anytime. You know, if you can see it pop up through the snow, and there's always, as you guys have tasted, pretty great stuff. So, any questions? Cool, thank you.
My mother had some kind of condition where the prescription ended up becoming this chamomile. I guess the doctor she saw suggested that she planted it in the garden. I mean, I really wasn't into plants then, but that chamomile took over every blank spot on the property. After that first time it was planted in our garden, it was found by the ton everywhere. So it's like, you might say, a serious, almost noxious weed. But it's one of the more pleasant things. My mother's demeanor, if I recall correctly, seemed to have been quite influenced. I don't know what she was unhappy about, but it was the Metricaria pineapple weed family. There's 3 or 4 of them, one that goes quite wild and some that will escape from the garden. And everybody should know, every parent who has children should know how to use some of these, because it'll save a great deal of grief and whatever when it comes to something that the kids pick up. And they can't sleep, or their stomachs ache, or they have headaches or something. Stuff at their feet cures it, and you ignore it and go to great expense to buy the purified poisons that you deal with these when your cure is right at your feet.
All right, so the last thing I forgot was the spruce needles, and we've been using the conifer needles of the spruce and a bit of the pine, and that adds a lot of vitamin C, right? The one thing, especially none of us shall have this problem, but it's said that pregnant women should not drink tea from spruce, and because there's something in that could cause miscarriages. So another great source of vitamin C, right? So I mean, if you're like me, you don't like the taste of boiled water, this is the beautiful way to drink your water. Yes, it's a bit of a diuretic, so you're a bit of a, you get a quart low and then a quart high by chasing the water all the time. But I've been in some really nasty water areas and made great tea with it and not had to taste that nasty water. So I always deal with those kind of situations with tea. So
yeah, the rose hips, I think if I remember right, you get 1,200 international units of vitamin C per 100 grams of hips. The next closest in our environment here is lodgepole pine, which is 200 international units per 100 grams. And the issue of boiling, vitamin C is destroyed by boiling. You retain the greatest amount of vitamin C by steeping, which means that you've got a rather high temperature, high enough to extract the material out of the extract the vitamin C out of the material, and you go that route. And it might be too that when you take water, boil it first, then add, when it cools off to, I think it's 140 degrees instead of 212. The Swedish army, they say, well, it's kind of hard to really pin things down. Just probably drink 5 times more than you would, and you'll get your vitamin C, and don't worry about whether you boiled it or not or whatever. But if you want to get into the technical aspects of it, the literature is always there. And the art of extracting materials through heat, hot water and all that, it's well worked out if you choose to find it, maybe on the internet or whatever. The Labrador tea, actually, in any great quantity, could be toxic. And there is another form of Labrador tea. There's 2 kinds throughout the world. This one is called Greenland's Groenlandicum. The other one The other one is actually dangerous to use unless you know what you're doing. If you take and extract the essence out of Labrador tea, there's a local person had one of these machines that ran on a low pressure boiler, and it gummed up the machinery because the Labrador tea produces a butter. It doesn't produce a liquid. It comes in as stuff that solidifies at normal room temperature. And he figured a dab of it on your tongue would be enough to kill you outright. So you're playing around with certain stuff that has the potential. You can make it as strong as you like. Now, one use for Labrador tea is that when the voyageurs, when they were extremely tired and knew they still had to work, they would fill their mouth with Labrador tea leaves as much as they could, and as the saliva worked up and everything, they swallowed their saliva. And that gave them enough oomph to make the last few miles and whatever. But when the university students would try this, they just literally turned green and became incapacitated. So I think you have to be acclimatized to it. It's a powerful astringent, and it'll
It's going to disappear off the shelf now, isn't it, fellas?
I walk
You guys
I
will
walk
be doing some
into
dips of it.
there's a summer camp where a lot of schools rent and use, and I walked into the camp to do my thing. They've hired me, and they said, oh, we might have to cancel because all the kids have come down with something where they're all moaning and laying in their bunks in fetal positions. They've picked up some kind of bug, and I said, oh, I see you probably drank a pretty big pot of Labrador tea, have you? For little grade 6s, they'll be put into a moaning fetal position very easily by drinking a little bit too much of Labrador tea. If that catches up with you, you'll know what the cause is. Don't worry, you don't have to write your will. You just drank too much Labrador tea. Because of that, the Labrador tea is astringent, and a flaccid bowel, if it's not flaccid, it gets even tighter, and it very quickly puts you into a moaning fetal position. That's, I've had those sort of things happen to me with the pain and the situation, whether it's snow blindness or whatever. The only way you can tolerate it, if you don't have aspirin and stuff, is to lay there and moan so that your brain vibrates a little bit. And hopefully someday you'll experience that, so you'll know what it's like to endure a pain that forces you to assume, because the only way that you seem to get any relief is to put your knees up against your chin against your knees and moan loudly. Funny as a rubber crutch.
Yeah.